Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and most weeks, my delightful co hosts, who are husky, hairy, huggable homos, and sometimes we have friends who join us, like to review films either current or classic. And this week, we are coming at you with not one, but two films from the current category. Films that came out in wide release the last couple weeks, we're catching up with, and we're going to give you our thoughts on Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. Do you pronounce the X? I don't fucking know. As well as Immaculate, a horror film coming out of South by Southwest that recently hit wide release. We got a whole lot to talk about with these two films, but before we do that, let me introduce you to the aforementioned husky, hairy, huggable homos. Jim Pugliafico is with us on the show. Hey, sweetheart, how's it going?
Hello. Hi. It's going good. Glad to be back here, ready to review these two movies. Got one of my favorite movie stars of all time in one of these films. And I'm not talking about Sydney Sweeney. I'm ready to go when you guys are. So tell me, are you guys ready?
I'm ready, but let's hear from our other co-host and see if he is equally as ready as you are, Jim, because yes, that's exciting for sure. William Lindis is with us, coming at us from Texas, which is unfortunately halfway across the country now from us. Will that time of year where like the veils between worlds thin and we can cross back and forth, unfortunately has faded. We're getting further apart again. But how the hell are you?
I'm great. Going to Jim's point, yes, I'm excited. I'm ready. Although I don't think that my readiness and excitement could ever eclipse yours, Jim.
Uh,
So, no, I hope that you all, I do want to just kind of talk about that. Did you guys have fun doing kind of the solar eclipse stuff this last week? Did you, get good view, good photos? Did you get a chance to put your glasses on, stare up at the sky, and enjoy those few minutes of lights out? How was your eclipse?
Our eclipse is really good. It was kind of a last minute trip. So 4 years ago, we after the last eclipse, we decided we were going to do this like camping trip to see the eclipse, and then we promptly forgot all about that. And then like a week and a half before the eclipse, we're like, shit, there's an eclipse. What are we going to do? And we ended up going back home to Indiana to see a lot of my family, and then drove a couple hours south of where they live into Totality down in Bloomington, Indiana. And Jim, maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience if you like. Your first one, my first one too. What you think?
definitely my first total eclipse. I've seen several. I've seen a few um, solar eclipses, but not total, not in totality. So this was real treat to be able to travel somewhere. We went right to the center of the totality path. We picked a spot. You should have seen me like figuring out where we were going to go. We knew Brad's family was in Indiana, so we would go there and make it kind of a dual trip and see family. But then it was okay. Where are we going to go to watch the eclipse? There's paid places you can go. There's pull over to the side of the road places you can go. Worrying about traffic, everything. But it was all in all, it was great. We ended up meeting up with some old friends that we hadn't seen in forever, who responded to a Facebook
Oh,
post and
wow.
said, "Hey, looks like you're going to be down in the area. We're going to be right in Totality. We're going to watch it from our pool deck in the backyard. Why don't you come and join us?" And they had a cookout, and other folks joined, and it was great. So yeah, Totality is something like really otherworldly, right? You don't get to experience that watching it, you know, just everything kind of go dark or almost totally dark, and watching the corona and seeing the prominences on the sun, basically the solar flares that come off the side, just astounding. Feeling the temperature go down, at that time, was strange. We lucked out with some good weather, thankfully. I know that was a concern for a lot of people, but it seems like most people at least got a glimpse of it, which was good. Um, yeah, man, the solar eclipse, a once in a lifetime thing. Glad we did it. Um, in hindsight, now I took some pictures, got some pictures with my phone and a neutral density filter and all that stuff. In hindsight, now I almost wish I hadn't even tried to take any pictures. Um, because first of all, none of the pictures that I take with my phone and the lens are going to be any better than what you're going to see like all over the internet. And maybe I should have
Mhm.
maybe stayed more in the moment and just kind of viewed the thing with these binoculars that I had. But still a great experience. I'm glad we could do it. Not sure we'll get to do it again. I know there's one coming in the US in like what is it, 2046 or something like that?
2048 or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I don't know. But
Got a
yeah,
little bit of
Jim.
time.
Yeah, but it was definitely very, very cool. We got to share a nice smooch under the total eclipse of our
Yeah, that
hearts,
was very
and that
special.
was very,
No.
very nice. How about you,
Yeah.
Will? Did you end up with clear views down in Texas?
I did. So of course we here in Austin, we were very fortunately like in the path of the totality. So like I just got to walk into my backyard and we had these pretty crazy like cloud cover like the entire weekend beforehand. And I was worried. Like, am I gonna be able to see this thing? But while there was still sort of like a layer of haze, you could still see like, if you looked up, it hurt your eyes, like if so I went out there, maybe about 15 minutes before totality. I didn't, since I was just in the house, I didn't need to like go and kind of like I didn't make a full event of like the entire part of it. But as it got closer, I went outside with my glasses, looked up, and just the most amazing sort of sights and sounds happened, as I'm watching there and I'm watching Pac-Man becomes a sliver, becomes solid dark. And I'm like, where did it go? It's like, and that's about the moment where it's pitch black in the backyard and the frogs and the crickets and the
Oh
nocturnal
wow.
things start me like serenading me. And I hear on the other side of the fence, the family that's there, their kids are like, the kids are like, I can't see it. I can't see it. And he's like, you can take off your glasses now. And so I'm like, oh, I guess I can too. And
Right.
you can look directly at it when it's just the totality itself.
Yep.
And at that same moment, we live about 2 blocks away from this academy. And I heard just probably a couple of hundred like school age kids, a couple blocks away, but all kind of cheering in unison. So it was like this really weird experience of like, Scott was at work, so it was just me in the
Oh,
backyard. But it was neat because it was like I got to experience something very singular and very like alone in a good way, like this was like my experience. But at the same time, I was experiencing surrounded by like hundreds of other people in my vicinity and millions of other people worldwide who are also kind of staring at the same thing and kind of having that same experience at the same time. I don't know, there was just something very humbling and exciting about that entire experience. So I as someone who is like, yeah, I'll check this thing out, but I wasn't necessarily like, I didn't have like eclipse fever. I definitely had a fantastic damn near magical experience with it.
mhm.
That's awesome, Will. Glad you had such a cool experience. Definitely was something Jim and I will never forget as well.
Mhm.
We could talk more about the eclipse. I know everybody is, but we actually have 2 movies that we want to discuss on this episode 503 of the Movie Bears podcast. Fellas, what do you think about getting into our films for this week?
I think this is the perfect time. Fire Nation's been defeated. There are no plants in the backyard wanting any of my blood. Limited number of mutant powers have manifested. Eclipse is behind us. We're moving forward with movies.
We haven't been raptured.
Yeah.
I know. After the 8th time, you'd think it would have happened, but apparently
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
All right. Well, listen up. We are going to be reviewing both Godzilla X, Kong, The New Empire, and Immaculate. Completely spoiler free for about 10 minutes. Then we're going to open things up to Spoiler Pound Town. If you do not want to get pounded by spoilers, that is your opportunity to step away for 20 minutes. Come on back for the rest of the movie discussion for Godzilla. If you are stepping away during the Immaculate discussion, there are no plugs at the end of this episode. Immaculate is kind of a plug for all three of us, kind of. It's an Immaculate but plug until it's not. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get things started with our discussion of Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire. Jim, as our resident Godzilla mega stan, it seems only fitting that you be the one to kick this conversation off. Give us just a very brief setup, because I think most folks know what this movie is all about. But tell us about your experience seeing it, your initial thoughts. Is this worth seeing while it's in theaters, catching on streaming, or skipping entirely? Where'd you come down?
Yeah, so let me start by just kind of summarizing the film a little bit. Godzilla X Kong is the title. Versus the previous one was Godzilla versus Kong, I think. This one is Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, not to be confused with the Frozen Empire, which was another movie that was out at the same time. Even though there was freezing in this movie, it's not the Frozen Empire, it's a New Empire. Okay? I just wanted to clear that up for everybody. So here's the synopsis of this movie. Obviously, we've got Godzilla and Kong. These two ancient titans clash in an epic battle as humans unravel their intertwined origins and connection to Skull Island's mystery. Okay, this isn't really much of a description of this film because there's a lot more going on. We have Kong, who is living in the oh wow, Will, help me out. Why am I forgetting the
Hidden Earth?
Something
like that. Yeah,
inner Earth or hidden Earth?
Isn't like Hidden Earth?
Hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth, I believe.
In Hollow Earth, where everything looks normal size to these titans, right? So while we're in Hollow Earth, everything kind of looks like almost like normal size. It's a little bit weird, right? And Kong is put up against another foe. And I'm not going to spoil anything here, but basically Godzilla comes in the whole film, but we have some adversarial action, we have some cooperative action. We have kind of a crazy movie here. My impressions of this film are, first of all, I would say this is a film where I would say this is a kind of a wait for streaming film. Really, I kind of had a little bit of fun with this movie, especially towards the end, where it actually got kind of crazier. Right, I was a little worried going in because if you look at the posters and the images, you've got Godzilla who's got these they put these arms on Godzilla that actually have like giant muscles, like a bodybuilder or a wrestler, and it looks very weird. And they have Godzilla and Kong running kind of at full speed into battle, which also looks really weird. They've done a few strange things to Godzilla and Kong in this film. And actually I wasn't fully on board with it at first, especially through the trailers and the beginning of the film. I'm like, this is very weird. And we'll talk about some of this in spoilers, what really got me kind of questioning whether I was going to enjoy this film. But towards the end, it picked up. It actually got crazier. It kind of went way over the top. And that's when I really enjoyed the film the most, kind of probably in the last third of the film, where it just went totally whole cartoony battle scenes, a lot of action in the last third of this movie, I will say. So yeah, this for me is a soft recommend, probably for streaming. I don't know if it's out now, but when it comes out, I'd say this is a perfect movie for streaming. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what my thoughts were.
All right, Jim, thank you so much for weighing in with your initial thinking here. Will, how about you? Obviously, we're going to go to spoilers here, so the bulk of the discussion will be there, but maybe give us a quick rundown of your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've not really super resonated with any of these like legendary pictures Godzilla films. So we had the 2014, the 2017, I forget which year the second one came out, and then Kong Skull Island into Godzilla v Kong into this, sort of like, so this is the fifth of that arc. And the thing that I've most been looking for is for these films to really figure out kind of like what flavor they want to be. And I think, a lot up till now, they've been mostly, I think that flavor has been mostly like vanilla, in that like they've kind of chosen sort of in between extremes and not really done much. Here, what we've got with Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, we've got a silly, kind of dumb movie. And I think because of that, it's probably my favorite of those five. I mean, it's one of those things where this movie does just absolute bonkers off the rails things that when you write them down on paper, it's like, well, this is stupid. I shouldn't watch this. Why would they do that? Why would they make that decision? But when you're watching them in the theater, especially, it just becomes a fun experience. And I think the fact that they keep ratcheting things up, to the next level, make it all the better. It's not a great movie. It's not a great movie at all. But because it's so silly, there are some moments where it's just like, you're kind of wondering, like, why the hell did they do that? What were they smoking when that made it to the script? The cast itself, I feel like, is trying to keep up with like all the shit that's happening, and so I don't know that any of the cast really gets to shine, with maybe the exception of the Rebecca Hall and Kaylee Hoddle, which is sort of like the main character, and the other main character who's sort of like the adopted daughter from like a no longer existing culture that are trying to sort of figure things out and have the relationship with Kong from the previous movies. I will say that actually the other character that I think is really good in this is Kong. I think they do a really good job of making that, giving us like the agency of Kong as a character and what he's going through, even though he's just, big monkey going around beating his chest. The other characters, Dan Stevens, Brian Tyree Henry, they're there. Nothing against them personally. They just like their job is, they don't really have a lot of weight. They don't have a lot to do aside from just add to sort of like the bizarre nature of this movie. Look, there are better movies that have come out this year, but there are also way worse movies that have come out this year. And there are also a lot of really boring movies that have come out this year. Films that, when you really look at what they do and what they accomplish, is sort of like threading the needle between things and not choosing. This film devotes. I think I talked last episode about how tired I was of films that just like didn't really choose a side. This film chooses a side and goes with it, for better or for worse. So soft recommend, but that's actually a huge feather in this film's cap, given again just how batshit crazy parts of it are.
Yeah, batshit crazy is a pretty good way of describing it. And I think, Jim, Will, you both, as usual, have kind of outlined the majority of my thoughts already. So I'll probably preserve some time for our spoiler discussion. But I will just say, initially, the Godzilla Kong team up, Jim, I think the scene you're talking about from the trailer, where like they almost like kind of like cock their arms and like run toward the screen. That was a light falling. It looked really silly in the trailer. I don't know if it was seeing it on the big screen or maybe they went back and massaged it a little bit. It looked better in the movie to me than it did in the trailer. So that helped. That was kind of encouraging. I'm just gonna say I love Godzilla. I like Kong. But can we please get some fucking Godzilla in these movies? Like some Godzilla centric focus. Like the last two now, three really have been all about Kong, basically, with Godzilla as a side player. They might as well not even put his fucking name in the title because he plays such a small role in things sometimes. I really hope that if we get another one of these films, it sounds like we are, that it is very Godzilla centric, with maybe Kong showing up to be the bro who comes to help or something. I don't know if like they think that like most people love Kong and all they want is Kong, 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 Kong. But like I signed up for these things because fucking Godzilla's in the title. And listen, my cup runneth over. We had -1 last year. Now we have Godzilla X Kong, whatever. It's a great time to be alive and be a Godzilla fan. But please, more Godzilla in Godzilla films. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Kong, 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 Kong. Isn't that a song?
Let me see that
Kong.
Kong. Yeah. No, we saw enough Kong. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Like, it's sort of hard because on paper, I should be more of a Godzilla fan because I am more of a Godzilla fan than like classic Kong or whatever. Within these movies, I do enjoy seeing Kong more than Godzilla because I think they've written a better Kong than they have a Godzilla. Again, within this line of film. So I think to your exact point, I think what needs to happen is not just like more Godzilla, but also like a story that really figures out what are we going to do with this character and how do we really give this Godzilla sort of a similar like emotional character arc like we get through Kong that plays out through each of these.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I have some thoughts on that when we get into spoilers.
Yeah. I think now is the perfect time to go ahead and make that transition. So if you have not yet seen Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire, now is your chance to step away for the next 19 minutes and 1 second to protect yourself from spoilers. Spoilers for this film are officially fair game. Can we start with like all the fucking apes in this movie? Like we had an ape as the villain in the last movie. Now apes are the villains of the new movie. Plus all the Kong overload. It just seems like a lot of apes.
We haven't even got to the apes movies yet that are coming this year, right? So
Yeah, that's right. Did you guys see a trailer for Planet of the Apes while studying that? Yeah. It was very jarring to see that. And then once you start seeing sort of like the ape society or whatever we want to call it that shows up in this movie, like my brain immediately started drawing connections between the two. And that's not always
ones
great.
that don't exist. Yeah. Yeah, it's strange. I mean, as we've alluded to, this is look, it's primarily a Kong movie. And I sometimes wonder what's going on with that. If there's any rights issues going on between Toho and Warner Brothers, Legendary. I know there is when it comes to release of these movies, which is one of the reasons why you don't see like -1 had a very limited release, and then they went back and did a little bit more. But there's some business arrangement between Legendary and Toho about rights for Godzilla that is monkeying with the business of these movies. But and one of the other reasons that I wonder about is Kong as a creature seems to be more expressive.
Yeah.
I think maybe the animators or whatever can maybe do more with that character to kind of pull the audience in and make the audience resonate with what Kong is feeling, as opposed to Godzilla, who basically just has monster face the whole time. So I wonder if that plays into it too. It's just a little bit easier to maybe the movie studio knows that it's easier for an audience to empathize with Kong. I'm not sure. That could be part of it.
I think there's another thing that comes into play here, right? And that's our anchor to these monsters is going to be the humans they interact with, right? That's the way that they are our POV into this world. We're meant to follow around the humans as they interact with these monsters and explore them. So we've got a couple of Godzilla movies that came out with pretty lackluster like human stories that went along with it. And they even tried, like, well, let's bring the Millie Bobby Brown character in and see what she can do. And it just didn't really click as well. But when they did Kong Skull Island, they got a bond really quickly. The sign language with the girl who's been sort of the through line through these 3 movies. And I think because of that, if you're a writer and you're the person that's tasked with writing exactly this movie, and you say, okay, what have I got to work with from the previous movies, not from all of Godzilla lore, but from within this storyline, you have less to sort of grasp onto with like the human side on the Godzilla side, but you've got something that's really, really golden and rich and like easy to play with on the Kong side. So it's almost like they haven't figured out the right way to incorporate the human characters into the Godzilla side of the story. And because of that, Godzilla becomes more of like a sideshow. So going to your point originally, Brad, I think what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to figure that element out. How do you have a character that interacts with Godzilla meaningfully? And it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be buddy comedy. When we saw Godzilla -1, there was a relationship between the protagonist and Godzilla, definitely an antagonistic one because of so that's what they have to figure out. That's what they've got to figure out is how do we make something that the Godzilla character can interact with, that's not just Millie Bobby Brown going in there and doing like a kind of like a, I don't know, we're going to call it a 5.5 because it's only about half of 11.
Yeah, I think they recognize that maybe, as you said, Will, we've got a totally, I think a completely different set of human characters in these last 3 movies than we had in the first couple movies, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if there's been a human through line in all of them. I don't know if Rebecca Hall was in the first 2 or not. I don't remember.
She's been in all of the Kong movies. So
okay, gotcha.
Skull Island. So we had 2 Godzilla movies, 1 Kong movie, and then 2 crossover movies.
Yeah, I thought
we followed the Kong through line.
I thought the human story in this movie actually took a half a step back compared to what it was in the previous 2 movies. We get it. The kid is, has this connection with Kong, which I thought was very well done in Skull Island. And they carried that on with Godzilla versus Kong. Here, it started to wear a bit thin on me. They're going back to that same ground again. The Brian Tyree, the podcaster storyline is, I'm still not sure why they're doing that. That was some of the most batshit crazy stuff that I've ever heard of. Like bringing a podcaster along to Hollow Earth, on this mission. Oh, you want to go? Okay, sure. We'll just take you along. Just weird stuff. Dan Stevens is fine. I think he's a good actor, but that his first scene in this movie, the dentist stuff, was just like, I'm like, what the fuck are we watching here? That is crazy. And in the end, it might have been, I think ultimately it was kind of fun, but just a totally different tone than we've gotten in these movies to date. And it just kind of got crazier after that. But I'm not so enamored with the human. I don't agree with that. They finally got a human story that works. I still don't think it does.
Just real quick on that, I think that this through line has been. It's not that this is the first time that it's been good. It's that it started off good in Kong Skull Island, and they've been able to replicate on that to varying degrees of success. But at least they have a foundation. If we saw the Quicksilver, the Scarlet Witch, show up in this one, or again 11 from Stranger Things show up in this one doing stuff with Godzilla, it would have nowhere near the same impact as when we first saw like Rebecca Hall. So I think that's what I'm saying. Not necessarily that this was the best version of it, but those those characters have been the best in this franchise, and so it's easy to carry them through.
The problem is they've removed all stakes with these characters. They have so much plot armor that, like, when they're in danger, like you don't fear for their health and safety at all. I mean, the little girl fucking rides Mothra in a cloud of magical sunshine, Bonnie Tyler backlit hair, fuck all. And it's like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, yeah, human storyline, but Jesus fucking Christ.
That's the. I think that's again. It's where it's one of those things where it's like it's so dumb that it turns back around and starts to become fun again. That's what I get from this. It's like none of these decisions should work, but when you put exactly all of them together, it makes them more fun as like a tapestry. Now, Jim, you said something a second ago that's really funny. You know those things on like Letterboxd where you see someone that makes like an incredibly specific list that like only a couple movies come. I've got one. All right.
Yeah.
Movies that came out in March 2024 that were a sequel to a franchise that have the word empire in the title and featured a podcast character who is completely pointless.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We have two of those.
We have two of those. It's weird that it happened twice.
Exactly. It's like somebody's talking to each other, I think. But yeah. Nothing against Brian Tyree Henry and even Rebecca Hall. I had to roll my eyes a couple times because they turned her into a complete exposition machine in a lot of this movie, which is unfortunate. Because I think she's really good, and I want to see more of her. And also Kaylee Hoddle playing Jaya. I think the next movie is going to be called Kong High, where Jaya goes to high school and like he becomes her protector, against the kids in the school. That's what's going to be.
I like the idea of like him just sort of like Kong in the hallways, like, wearing like stereotypical like kids clothes, like a backwards ball cap holding a skateboard, but also he's ginormous and kind of crashing through like half of the building.
And the movie would be called Godzilla something Kong, and they'll have Godzilla in it fighting a monster on the other side of the world that has absolutely nothing to do with the plot of the movie, like they did in this one. There was some ice kaiju or something along the way. Not the main villain one, but like didn't they have like another one, like a squid monster or something? Yeah.
That did relate to the plot. You may have been sleeping during this connection. I'm not sure.
Tell me how.
So Godzilla had to go destroy that Titan because that Titan was like guarding this huge nexus of like radioactive energy that Godzilla had to like charge up from to go like put the smackdown on the evil apes.
I see.
So he went, killed her, sucked up all the energy from Barbie Land. That's how he became pink. He basically destroyed Barbie Land to fuel his crusade, and then he went to Hollow Earth.
Got it.
Here's where you learn kind of what this type of what this movie has got for you, and it's one of those things where I was enjoying myself, but not sure until exactly this scene was exactly as silly as it was, and it made me like kind of click in and go like, all right, this is what this movie is. I'm now on board with it because it's a different movie than I expected, but I can at least get on board with this one. And it's where so we've got the enemy, the bad ape. He's got this magical crystal that lets him control the frost kaiju like a Pokemon, and it breathes ice breath all over Kong, and his arm is gonna like, it's dying, it's decaying, he's gonna lose his arm. And then Dan Stevens comes out and says, hey, you know what? I made a robot arm for Kong, and it happens to be like I can run over and get that right now. You want me to go do that?
Want me to get it?
And don't worry, I've also got some special serum there that when I inject it at the same time, it will completely cure all of the frostbite. And as soon as they did that as a way of giving him like super punch arm, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm on board. This is this is stupid, but
little Transformers.
It's a fun stupid, and that was that real life. And then everything after their magical Mothra moment, I'm on board because I already had that stupid fist moment when he's riding Godzilla into battle, and they're fighting over the little Pokemon controller for all of it. I'm just like, yes, give me all of this, because again, all of this is dumb.
And Baby Kong, Baby Kong, you gotta have Baby Kong. You have Baby Yoda, who made who's who's doing gangbusters in the Star Wars world, so we got to have a baby Kong. The next movie will have a baby Godzilla. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
Oh, but will it be so are we saying we're going to have Godzuki?
That might be a different one, but it's going to be baby Godzilla because they're cute and the kids love it. But here's what I will say to compliment this movie. I actually did like the the villain dude and his control over this frost kaiju thing. Like, you started to actually have some empathy toward this frost kaiju who was like had been under control, had been tortured and made to do all these things. I think it's pretty astounding that in a movie like this they could bring on this character and kind of make you feel something toward that character. Have a, it's not just a one-dimensional situation of a bad guy and another bad guy henchman going along here. But I like that part of it.
Yeah, it definitely gets really crazy, especially at the end. Super bonkers,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I actually kind of miss when these movies were like grounded. Like, I think back to the first of these MonsterVerse movies,
Gareth Edwards one.
Yeah, with Bryan Cranston and not. I don't know. I typically hate the human moments in these anyway, but like at least in that movie, like humans didn't have fucking laser guns and like super orbital hollow earth flyer ships and camouflage fields and all this shit. Like, it was like United States Army, Navy, whatever versus a fucking monster. Like, and I think they're creating some of the same problems that the Toho films had in some of the later eras where, man's technology had advanced so much that they're like shooting Godzilla with fucking laser cannon tanks. And, it just, I don't know, like when the monsters themselves are already so ungrounded, especially literally this one, when they're all flying around in zero gravity. And
they fight in zero gravity.
Oh my God, that was so fucking stupid.
Makes it easier on the CGI.
It does, because
CGI
nothing has to have any weight, and Godzilla just floats by like, everything's too fantastical for me to really latch onto and feel grounded in everything else that's going on. So it got bonkers, and yeah, it's fun, but I think I had to give up like something as price of admission for that, and I don't like the price I paid.
I think the best part for me about this is that we do live in a world where kind of both Godzillas exist, right? Like, I feel like if this was the only kind of Godzilla verse type thing, I might have a different feeling coming out of this. But knowing that we have sort of like the more grounded, more serious one and the more fantastical wild one, and I can kind of in the same kind of span of time see both and get something different from both, that works really well for me. So what this means is I still need more of the Toho ones that are happening right now. I need those to keep happening because those help. Those are the steak that I get to eat so that I can enjoy my dessert. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And on our previous topic, I'm like, I have a feeling the filmmakers were like, you know what, audience? You're always ragging on us for not making our CGI monsters look like they have weight and heft and like feel grounded. And we're always getting this criticism from you. So you know what? We're going to go totally the other way and say, fuck all that. We're just going to make them totally weightless and have them fight in weightless, hollow earth, fucking wherever the zero gravity was. We're just going to go the other way and make it as silly as possible. But to be fair, that the fight that was up on the surface of Earth, granted, there were thousands and thousands of casualties in those buildings. Unfortunately, God rest those souls. I thought it was pretty awesome. The climactic fight scene in this film, how it was rendered, and everything kind of came together story wise, and the effects I thought were really good, and you got a lot of smashing, roaring, whatever. So I did like the climax of the film.
And as cat people, you must appreciate Godzilla's inclination to curl up in the biggest size
Yes.
box it can find to take a nap.
Yeah, I wonder
Yeah.
where that came from. Like, oh, let's make Godzilla like a cat and have him curl up in his little cat bed called
With
the
the
Coliseum.
Coliseum. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think we've exhausted the Hollow Earth well of discussion for Godzilla, Kong, the New Empire at this point. Jim, Will, unless there's anything else you've got to get out that we haven't yet so far, how do you feel about moving forward?
Let's do this.
I think we hit the high points. Yeah, so we can move on.
Agreed.
Oh,
All
God,
right.
I'm ready.
All right. All right. So we are going to go ahead and put a pin in our Godzilla Kong discussion and move on to the second film of this week's episode. We got an opportunity to check this film out at South by Southwest Film 2024, but we're going to wait till after the jump for Will to tell you all about it and set this up for us. Here we go. Our discussion of Immaculate. All right, Will, as part of our ongoing South by Southwest Film 2024 coverage, we, of course, are going to be chatting about Immaculate. Tell us a little bit about this film screening at South by, kind of the experience and your initial thoughts. Was this worth watching in theaters, waiting for streaming, or, as always, potentially skipping? That is a valid option, too.
Yeah, so Immaculate was one of the headliners of South by Southwest, which again we've been covering because we had a blast while there. This film is directed by Michael Moen, starring Sydney Sweeney, who we've seen from such things as White Lotus and other things, but I think White Lotus is sort of like the most recent touch point, at least for the three of us. And, one of the things that was really neat about this as a South by offering is that we're starting to see a specific type of South by headliner that personally I'm kind of excited about, and that's these larger in terms of either budget or distribution model horror films getting at least one or two of those headliner slots. I think back to, Evil Dead Rise. We've seen A Quiet Earth. We've seen Final Girls. We've seen some fun things there in the past. So Immaculate is a movie. Sydney Sweeney stars as a very devout nun-to-be who moves to this beautiful area in the Italian countryside where she comes into this convent that's it's well known and sort of prestigious. But as she's there, dark things start to happen. Ooh, and we'll talk about what some of those things are. And in terms of where this movie goes, I think that there are a few very specific types of drenched in Catholic imagery, religious horror movies that have existed throughout the course of the years. And I think this borrows very heavily from a lot of those. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes it's fun to play within kind of a pastiche. But I think that it's important to understand that with this one, it's not necessarily that it's reinventing the wheel as much as it's just sort of honing what it's doing with the wheel. This is for me, if last episode was a very 2.5 star, kind of right down the middle, not really excited, but not really recommending it. This is a very 3.5 star episode for me, because that's kind of where I land on both the Kong movie and with Immaculate for that very reason. What it does well. It just didn't bring me anything too dramatically new. Sydney Sweeney is very good in this. She, especially when she has to do some of her more Scream Queenie type stuff, where she's facing some of the more horrific stuff. We get some close-ups on her face. She's a good actress. She's a good actress, and we get to see that. And I think some of the more visceral moments of this movie, while they will definitely turn some people off, and that's totally fair. But I think that they worked within the context of this story, and they left me sort of with a strong feeling coming out of the theater. Not like a happy feeling. That's not what you get from movies like this. But I still enjoyed the experience. Again, there are some flaws. But overall, I think this was a really strong entry into that South by headliner horror slot that I was mentioning, and a film that I think if you're a horror fan, sometimes it can be feast or famine. I think this is one that would definitely trip a lot of triggers if you happen to be sort of in that line of fandom. So that's the recommendation that I would give.
All right, Will, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on Immaculate. Jim, how about for you? So this one was screening at South by Southwest Film. We had a chance to, of course, catch up with it and kind of see what it was all about. Did it trip your trigger as much as it could be tripped, or did it maybe flub it? How'd you come down?
No, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think I'm right there with Will. I think this film definitely knows what it is. Probably unfair of me to expect anything, expect it to kind of tread any new ground. I love Sydney Sweeney. I loved her in the White Lotus series that came out, a couple years ago now. Also loved her in a movie called Reality about, it's kind of a true to life story about reality winner who got caught like sneaking out classified documents out of the government, and she's really good in that. But those are both kind of subdued roles compared to this one. This one, she, like Will says, she definitely gets to try out some more more acting chops, and she does it well. I think she carries this film. She's practically in every shot, and I think the film is better for it, even though, like I said, it doesn't, story-wise, it doesn't really cover anything really new. We'll talk about it in spoilers, but I thought the ending was well done, and kind of ends on an ambiguous note a little bit. And we'll talk about that also somewhat. And that was interesting to me, an interesting part of the film. So yeah, I think this is worth seeing. Again, probably another one not to run out to theaters to see, but catch it on streaming if and when it does show up there. So that's kind of where I am, middle of the road for me.
All right, middle of the road. I think for me, you gotta love that films like this screen at South by Southwest. Film festivals in general, but especially South by Southwest Film offers such a great platform to get these kind of movies in front of audiences, especially that will enjoy this kind of thing and kind of amplify the signal about these films coming out. I think about Late Night with the Devil, which we saw last year at South by Southwest Film, right? And has only recently, come out in wide release so people can see it. I'm actually talking with friend of the show, Cisco Salgado, right now about Late Night with the Devil. And it's like, oh, I saw that a year ago, but like he's getting to see it now. We're having a discussion, I'm kind of glad that like Immaculate didn't have to wait so long to come out after the festival. Like people are getting to see it. There's a lot of buzz about it for sure, but very, very cool that it played at South by. I think where I struggle with this movie though, especially after seeing so many movies at South by, and like seeing so many horror movies in general, is it kind of feels to me like someone just like went to Chat GPT and said, I want a creepy, gory movie about a nun and religious fanaticism and miracles, but like make it kooky ooky full of jump scares. And Chat GPT was like, Immaculate, blah, 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 blah. And it's very like, I don't know. It's like if you look at a car that's made up of parts from like 20 other cars on the outside, you're like, yep, that's the convertible. Yep, that's the Mustang. Oh, that's the Bugatti. it's hard to see it for like its own like unique special form because you can pick out all the parts that came from other things, and that's really how I felt about Immaculate. I'm really glad that we got to see and catch up with this one, but it didn't really hold my interest very much. Cool like atmospherism, I guess, but some, I don't know, I feel like some weird boneheaded choices, and I'm so tired of ambiguous endings. I just am. They're not fucking artsy and cool to me. Like they don't make me like, oh, that was an incredible movie. For me, it's like I just spent 2 hours watching your fucking movie. Like, why don't you give me an answer? I realize though that I am not necessarily the typical moviegoer, but I do know other people who saw this movie and had the same complaint. And it's like, you know, in a time where we're trying to get people to go to cinemas to like watch genre films like this, I think maybe that's a complaint that needs to be listened to, because people are like, I'm going to stop going to see horror movies if they're like this. I'm out. I'm not in for it. So I'm not a professional filmmaker. If anyone's listening who is, maybe take that feedback for what it's intended as is a gift from just some of your audience. But this was a frustrating watch for me. I would say this is a pass.
Well, we should. We'll talk about that ambiguous ending, I'm sure, in spoilers. But like I said, I did like the atmosphere that this one created, kind of in the convent there in Italy. The evil convent staff who, you know, initially, well, I'm giving way too many spoilers just by talking about it, so I'm gonna stop.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop.
I think we're probably,
Yeah.
if you guys are on board, are we at the point to pull back the spoiler veil?
Sure.
I think so. I think we people know where we're at with these, and so yeah, let's dive in.
All right, cool. So spoilers for Immaculate are officially fair game. If you choose to continue listening, you do so at your own peril. A big spoiler might just jump out at you from behind something and scare you to death, or quite frankly not, because you're totally ready for the jump scares. But spoilers, they are happening. Jim, you were wanting to talk about something, but you were kind of dancing around it a little bit because of spoilers. Do you want to get us going?
Well, I mean, like a lot of these films about young nuns that eventually go into the horror realm. She's brought in to the convent. Everything seems fine. The staff there, the priests, the head priest, the other priests, everything seems really cool. They're all friendly. The other nuns are welcoming her, and then, you know, after a time, things start to feel a little weird. She's questioning, and then it goes full on evil, right? At some point. And what's happening here is, at least the way I understand it, is they somehow inseminate her, right? At some point in the movie, and want to pass it off as an immaculate conception, right? And maybe you guys understand this better than I do, for some reason that sort of escaped me. I don't know whether it was to build the faith, to revitalize faith, or what the purpose was.
No, they did it.
Is insemination what happens when you go to seminary?
Yes. Well,
yes. It's got to. The words are somehow
they're
related.
There's some pretty famous scandals about that very thing. But that's not this show. So Jim, the reason for it is not because they're trying to like create faith or anything like that. I mean, these are faithful people in and of themselves, right?
Yes.
So let's start with that. So this is not a group that is trying to manipulate faith. This is a group who are believers. And what they have is they have one of the nails that was used to pin Jesus to the cross, and they were able to find some of the DNA. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to force the second coming is what they're doing, so it's right. Not out of forcing faith as much as their own faith, but like, hey, we can be the ones that help usher in
recreate Christ.
Yeah. Now, the fact that they had, multiple kind of like, dead women and dead babies that were over 20, they said 20 years in this film worth of like experiments. to get to this point, definitely gives you a view of kind of like maybe what we should view as sort of like a moral shortcoming of their specific view on faith.
Right.
But yeah, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. And in the end, the jumping kind of to the end after some horrific sequences, body horror, her going through labor, them trying to force her to go through with the birth, and toward the end when she's alone, she ends up alone, and the baby, I guess, is coming. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's a baby. We don't know if it's a demon. And I think the movie wants, Brad, to your comment about ambiguous endings, I think here's where the movie probably could have done something really cool, is maybe go a little bit further than the ending did, right? The movie kind of shows her giving birth, screaming. We can hear audio of what appears to be, sounds like a birth, and then we hear some kind of raspy breathing. Doesn't really sound human. It doesn't sound fully human. So it could have been something really grotesque. We don't know. It could have been a normal baby.
We see a little out of focus. We do get to see a little bit of it, but it's like intentionally sort of like at a distance and out of focus, moving, but you can't really see in there.
Right. And it has sort of like a reddish color. So like it could be a demon, or, it could just be a baby that was just born that's like covered in, blood and fluids.
Struggling to breathe. Right. We don't know that. I think that, like I said, I think the movie, in my mind, I kind of wanted it to go a little bit further and not leave it so open-ended, because I'm trying to ask myself, okay, what did the movie say about this whole ordeal that she went through, that she births this thing and then she ends up smashing it with a rock at the end, her own quote unquote flesh and blood, right? It's horrific, definitely horrific, and it fits the genre. I just wish it had explored it a little bit more.
Yeah, for me, and I think that that's absolutely fair. I think everyone's going to come into a film with sort of like certain like things that they want out of it, or things that like most trip their trigger. For me, the strongest part of this movie was the ending. I loved where it ended, because this became a movie that ended with a story of catharsis, right? This is a woman whose faith had been weaponized against her, whose autonomy had been taken from her, whose very womanhood had been used and warped to sort of defile what she thought of as a religion. Face it, this is one of the most unimaginable things that could happen to this character. And by the time that she emerges there, the idea that what she gave birth to, if it was a child, but she is not able to really see it as such because of the circumstances of its birth, or whether it's an actual demon, whether it's deformed because of the genetics, that's less important than her in this moment sort of reclaiming whatever control she has back, wrestling it back in the most bloody and grotesque way possible to get that personal catharsis. It's not unlike the ending. I think it has the same emotional resonance as like the final scene of like Midsummer, which is also kind of a film that kind of ends on that moment of like dark catharsis. So I think that's why it clicks so well for me. But again, cool. That's not to say that mine is right and yours is wrong. It's just like, for me, this is like the reason why that ending was so strong for me.
But those ideas, Will, that you mentioned, right, that, it could have been this or it could have been that, any of those, if they were somewhat explored, and it doesn't have to be like black and white, lay it all out for me, but maybe just a little bit more to make me like go, oh shit, like I think would have been a little bit better. I didn't hate the ending. I just wanted a little bit more. I thought the ending was well done. I thought her acting there was great. I thought it was very tense and terrifying. And when it all went to credits, I kept asking myself, I wonder if the filmmakers if there's a message here in terms, obviously there's something going on in this film that equates to the message of a woman's autonomy, right? Obviously,
That's exactly
right.
it.
And I just wish it was maybe a little bit stronger. I don't know.
I think if they had revealed like it as a specific thing, then that no longer becomes the message. At that point, it's about, you know, it's now about like, holy shit, she gave birth to the Antichrist or whatever it is. It's no longer about a woman's like, you know, catharsis after these terrible things happen to her. So I think that's why if I were the filmmaker, I would have made the decision that they did, which is to sort of leave that open. Because if you start to describe it, then that becomes the story as opposed to the Sydney Sweeney, like not Sydney Sweeney, but like the Celia character, what her part of the story is.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think any way you go there, even though I wanted more, if I had gotten more, could have been viewed as pandering or problematic, right, by different political sides. Especially in today's environment, with what's going on with women's rights and body autonomy and stuff. I think this is a somewhat veiled, but probably not too veiled message in this film about that. Trying to say how that kind of control or loss of autonomy can be horrific.
Especially if you're in some catacombs underneath
Yes,
this really old church, being chased by like this
like a
creepy
half
dude
burned priest guy.
who's like trying to fucking clone Jesus from blood and a nail. And
Yeah.
yeah. Big social messaging here for sure. All right. Any other final thoughts on Immaculate? I mean, we still have 10 minutes in this section of the show, but it feels like we've exhausted a lot of the things we have to say.
Yeah, I think we kind of got what we're, again, this is one where, you know, we've talked about it as a horror film, and I think really the conversation point for us did land in sort of how well that last scene resonated, right? And we could beat that thing up for another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But that, you know, I think everyone gets the point, right? But I do think that the important idea here is that, you know, I will always champion horror. And so this is a good opportunity to, you know, between this, we've got The First Omen, you know, there are horror films out there. And yeah, they're going to show up on streaming, but if you are a horror fan and you can stomach blood and gore, which not everyone can, and that's fair, and if you can stomach some of the more, I mean, let's face it, kind of sexual violence stuff that does sort of exist within the confines of this story, and not everyone can, and that's also okay. Check these movies out. You know, go see horror. You know, horror is always worth championing.
Good message, Will.
Indeed. Super agree. And thank you again to South by Southwest 2024. Whether these movies are good, bad, somewhere middle of the road, we appreciate having the opportunity to see films like this at those festivals and out in wide release beyond the festivals as well. So super, super cool opportunities there. All right, gentlemen. Well, that wraps up our movie discussions for this week. We talked about a lot on this episode, and I know we're going to have a lot to talk about next week as well as we get into, speaking of South by Southwest, our reviews of two more films coming out of the festival that are in wide release right now, Monkey Man and Civil War. So Movie Bears podcast fans, do your homework this weekend relative to when we're recording. Go see either movie or both so you can be part of the discussion next week. We'd love for you to join in case folks want to chat with us between now and that recording, though. Jim Pugliafico, where can people interact with you online?
Oh, you can find me on Letterboxd, which is my kind of movie social media platform, where you can find my ratings of all the movies that I've seen in the last few years. My handle there is at JJP Out West. And then you can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, Facebook, William Lindis. Look for me on the different socials, including Letterboxd at the Movie Bear. Interestingly enough, I got a friend who actually went with me to go see Immaculate, and we'd been talking about films, and he was like, I should make a letterbox. So he made one. We followed each other, and then he looked over and he said, holy shit, you've seen 3,500 films? And I said, no, I've logged 3,500 films. Yeah, so it's funny just like how long, how long this platform has been around, and like just how well it's become a part of like just sort of film fandom discourse. So, but anyway, if you want to be a part of that as well, find me on Letterboxd at I'm the Movie Bear there.
All right, Will, thanks so much. Appreciate you. Folks, you can find me on Facebook. I found out recently that only old people are on Facebook, which is a really disappointing thing to hear. But you know what? That's where I am. Speaking of Facebook, I have to call out that because we put on Facebook that we were going to Indiana to see the eclipse, we got word from our friend Johannes from the Movie Mistrial podcast that he and his husband were in the same area.
On the same night.
Their way, on the same night. They were in Phoenix. We were going up to Phoenix to fly out to Indiana, and they were on their way through to Austin to see the eclipse. And we were able to connect and have a little podcast tete-a-tete. We did an informal movie mistrial over some deep dish Chicago style pizza, which was really good. Thank you, Luminaldi's. But really, really great to see those folks in person, give some hugs. We talked about movies for what, babe? Like almost 2 hours straight.
Yeah. That was most of the discussion, because we really hadn't like had a chance to sit down with Johannes and his husband. Is it Ryan? I think
Ryan.
I have it.
Yeah,
Ryan. Yeah. Really sweet guys. We need to have Johannes on the podcast again.
We do.
We did, but just great to. It's always great to like meet up with friends of the show and other podcasters that we associate with. So this was a rare opportunity, and we're like, yeah, let's do it.
So thank you, Facebook, for bringing the olds together. We had a fun time. Anyway, you can also find me on Letterboxd. Just look for iBradPro. I have not rated 3,500 films, but I have been rating a bunch since I started keeping track at the beginning of 2023. And well, I'm still doing it this year. My only question is whether to rate films that I have rewatched. I know there's a rewatch option. But I feel weird doing that. And I don't know, like
I will yes, rate them, because there's two big reasons for it. One, sometimes your score will change, right? Sometimes your thought will change. So it can be nice to sort of go like, yeah, on a second watch, this was stronger, or like, ooh, I watched this 5 years ago, and
now
I don't
cringe.
know what I was thinking then, so that can be part of the fun. And two, it will infuriate you when you go back to like if you don't log the rewatch, when you go back to like, I know I watched something last Wednesday. What the hell was it? Then you can have log it or rewatch. It counts.
Fair point. All right. Mad Max Fury Road and Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. I will go rate you right after this episode ends. It was my plane watching on the trip. And I'll have to lock those in. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. It was a pleasure as always. Jim, Will, chatting movies with you is one of my favorite things ever. So I love when we get together to do this. And folks, if you weren't part of the live listening thing that happened tonight relative to when we recorded, we'd still love for you to be part of the conversation. Let us know what you thought of Godzilla, Kong, whatever, Empire, or Immaculate on our posts on X, Twitter, whatever the fuck you want to call it, or Facebook, YouTube, etc., etc. We'll see y'all next time. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.